Credit cards are insidious. They're easy to use, and next thing you know, you've got unmanageable debt. Is that happening to you or someone you know? Ted is here. Let's begin.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Okay, Ted is here.
Insidious, eh?
Insidious. That was the word. I looked it up on AI. I don't know what it means. So Ted has a cold.
I do have a cold.
We will see if he can last for the entire show or not. Mm-hmm. We will also see if I can get through the show without spilling my fluids all over the desk, as I believe I did last week. So, Ted, you remember our Joe Debtor study, which I can't remember if that was last week we talked about it, or I think it was actually. Yep. What was the key takeaway from that study?
Well, our client's credit card debt was up 26% over the year before. That's the biggest increase we've ever seen for anything.
Biggest increase ever, which is why we're talking about credit cards today. So in the Canadian population last year, credit card balances were up 7%.
Which is still a huge number.
Which is a huge number. But for our clients, it was up 26%. And that's because our clients are the leading indicator.
That's right.
It's like if I want to know what the weather's going to be in Toronto, well, I look to see what's happening in Kitchener because 2 hours later it's going to get there. That's what's happening with our clients. They're getting into trouble. They're the first people to get into trouble.
Right.
Because they're the ones who've lost their job, gone through a divorce, illness, whatever it is. You use credit cards to survive. Boom.
Right. So suddenly you can't deal with the debt.
Exactly. So sorry about the rest of the economy. That's probably what we've got coming. So let's discuss this insidious problem. First, we'll have to look up what insidious means. So I'm going to throw some questions at you. You answer them.
Sounds like the name of one of the characters of Mary Potter. It's insidious. It's not.
It could be. Maybe that's it. I'm going to ask you the questions. There's no notes on your cue card, so you're going to have to make up your answers.
Perfect.
And then I'll just fill in as your voice fades. Question number one. It is now the norm to use credit cards for everything. That's not a question. I'm making a statement.
You are.
That's what
I agree with that statement.
Okay. So should that be the norm?
I have a real problem with people using credit cards for everything because you still psychologically don't think of the credit card as cash. And so if you just tap it and let the charge go through, you don't even, put the card in and do your PIN number to give you that added level of security. You don't think about what you're spending.
It's not real.
That's right.
In the old days when you and I were a boy, which was the 1950s, I think? I can't remember how old we are. We had these things called bills, $5 bills, $200
Folding money was a big deal.
This was even before it was like the plasticky stuff we have now. It was like actually on paper,
right.
And you had to pull it out of your wallet, put it down, and you knew you were spending money.
And if you were smart, you'd say what you were putting down, and you'd count the change back.
Yes. Oh, it's $10.
That's really old school stuff.
That's right. Here's a 10, and I remember working at a hardware store as a teenager and having to learn to make change. And it took me a while to understand the trick because it would be, okay, you gave me a $10 bill and the thing cost, $8.75. And I'd be going, okay, 10 minus 8. That's not how you do it.
Right.
You count up. Oh, $8.75. Okay, here's a quarter. That gets us to 9. Here's a dollar. Gets us to 10. When I figured that out, I was like a genius. But it was real money.
Right.
That was the point. And today it isn't. So what is the lowest amount that you think you should charge on a credit card? Because you mentioned tapping.
Yep.
Is it okay to go to the coffee shop and tap, or do you have some other policy on
So we've
that?
had this conversation before. I think there has to be a minimum dollar amount that you consider significant. Otherwise, you don't really pay attention to what you're doing. When I was a young man, I was every $5 or more was something I had to look at. Now I think that number is more like 20, but that's just because I'm an old fella.
Right, you're old.
Right.
And if you were Warren Buffett, the number would probably be $100,000 or something.
With Warren Buffett, it might be $5.
Right, it probably is. It probably is. So the problem we have is that we use credit cards for everything. We don't use cash, and we're never going back to cash.
That's impossible.
It's impossible. Right. So, and if you actually paid cash at a store, they kind of look at you funny, like.
Well, so the question is the next generation that's never will have used cash, will their attitude towards credit cards be different than our generation?
I would assume so. Like, how can it not be?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
They're getting paid in Bitcoin and God knows whatever else. I don't know.
We all just use Bitcoin now for everything. So it's I guess the first point is there is this psychological aspect to it. The title of the show, Are Your Credit Card Habits Leading You into Debt? Well, if it's not even a real thing in your mind, then yes, that certainly has the potential to get you into trouble. Now, the real problem, of course, is the whole debt aspect of it.
Right.
So, and that's kind of using a credit card as your bank, because I'm borrowing. So the big trap you get into is I need that thing or I want that thing. I put it on my credit card and I'll pay it off next month. And how often do people pay it off next month?
Well, our clients don't.
Not all the time. That's why our credit card balances are increasing. Now, what's the real problem with using credit cards? What's the big, like, why are we?
Anytime you use credit, you're paying somebody for using their money instead of your money.
And interest rates on credit cards are higher than interest rates on mortgages and loans and everything else.
If you've got a great preferred credit card or something, maybe they're charging you 11%, but the average credit card is somewhere between 19 and 27.
Okay, so I buy something for $1, and let's say in my hypothetical world, I make 0 payments for a year and then pay it off. I've paid $1.20.
No, actually, it'll probably be like $1.24 because they'll charge you interest on the interest. It's done compounding, right?
It's a compounding thing. And so if it took me 5 years to pay it off, I mean, I guess using the rule of 72, you know the rule of 72?
Sure, but let's tell everybody how it works.
You tell me how it works.
I don't remember.
It's if you take 72 and divide the number into it, that tells you how long it takes to pay it off. So 72 divided by 20% interest, that's more than 3.
It's 3.5. Yep.
3.5. So if 3.6, he can do the math in his head.
It doesn't matter.
I can't do it. So the point is, if you bought something for $1 and the interest rate was 20% and you didn't pay anything until 3.5 years later and then paid it off, you paid $2.
Right.
There was $1 for the thing and $1 for interest. That's the problem with credit cards.
And it's insane.
Now, over the last, couple of weeks, like we referred to our Joe Detter study. And so I've been doing a bunch of interviews on it. And one of the questions I got asked a lot was, well, everyone knows it's 20% interest. Why are people using credit cards then?
Well, knowing something and actually being consciously aware of what that's costing you are not the same thing. So I know the credit card has an interest factor to it. In fact, it says on the bills now, right? It'll take you 200 years to pay off this balance. But unless you're consciously thinking about that when you're making the purchase, it just doesn't register.
Well, I got 2 responses to that. Yep. The first one is I don't actually get a bill in the mail anymore.
Well, that's true too.
Everything's electronic.
Yep.
So you
just hit delete?
Exactly. That's exactly what I do. Well, I don't get an email. I go into my banking thing on the computer. And I go in there like once a week because my credit card balance is low and I've got lots of business expenses, so I'm paying it off more than every month. I don't actually look at my statement. I just look at the list on the computer of all my transactions.
Right.
And I can go, yep, that all looks legit.
But you pay the balance, so you don't ever see an interest charge or service charges or any of that stuff.
This is true. Whereas in the olden days, like, I don't know, 5 years ago or whatever, you got this piece of paper in the mail, and you're right, it said on it, if you only make the minimum payment, it will take you 100 years.
Right.
And here's how much you paid in interest, and here's the interest rate and everything. So I think it's easier to tap and pay, but it's also easier to ignore what the numbers are just because of this electronic world we live in. So that's the second problem with the credit card. So the problem number 1 is it's too easy, and problem number 2 is the interest. Now, we're being very negative here. We're talking about penalty and
we are being negative.
Let's look at the positive side of this. The reason you use credit cards is I get all the free stuff, right?
Nothing's free, but okay.
Okay, so explain that to me then, because I use my card and I get points, and so now I can book my airline and it doesn't cost me anything. Okay, what am I missing here?
Well, so can you imagine any bank doing something for free for people?
I cannot.
And so that means the cost of these rewards programs are somehow built into the credit card. Either the merchants are paying a higher merchant fee to cover it, or somehow you're paying some sort of fee to cover it.
And I agree, the merchant is paying, 1%, 2%, whatever they're paying, but that gets incorporated into their prices. Everyone is paying that.
Exactly.
So it costs the same. If I go to the store or pay cash by credit, I'm paying the same $100 for the thing.
Yep.
So I'm not too worried about that because my behavior doesn't impact that. But the real problem, I think, is I'm trying to earn these rewards so I spend more.
Right.
It's like, okay, I want to take a trip and I need to get 1,000 reward thing or whatever.
I'm trying to upgrade my flight or whatever it is.
Right. So I don't really need that thing, but if I spend it, that'll get me up to the next level. That's, I think, the psychological thing
which is why they do it.
So it is exactly that. It is an addictive thing to make you spend more.
Well, it's like anything else, right? That's you're making this little decision and there's an immediate reward for it, so you feel better about it. You can't deal with the big problems in your life, but you can go out, you can get a latte for $7 and feel good.
I don't know what a latte is, but it's some fancy coffee.
And right? I don't drink the stuff.
You don't drink? No. Ted does not drink coffee. We've said it many times on this show.
Don't need me on caffeine. That
his
would be
mug
bad.
here is just a prop. There is nothing in it whatsoever. I'm not going to turn mine over because we did that last week and it made a huge mess. So, okay, the title of the show, Are Your Credit Card Habits Leading You into Debt?
Right.
So we've talked about kind of, gaming the points in the reward system.
Okay.
The other problem, and you see this all the time, is I pay off one credit card with another.
Right.
And, okay, why is that a problem then?
Well, I mean, the first time you do this, the logic probably is you got a new card and there's some kind of promotion. So it's low interest, it's a deal, transfer your balance. You don't cancel the old credit card. You simply now have doubled down. You got twice as much access to credit, which means eventually you're going to have twice as much debt.
And so at the start, it actually does make sense.
Right. The first time you did it, if there's a deal, 19% on this credit card, it's a promotion, it's only 1% over here, transfer the balance. It makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. But you're right. If I then don't cancel my other card, then I've got a huge problem now because now I've got two cards and I'm paying interest on both of them.
Yeah, the classic example of that was when lines of credit, personal lines of credit originally got popular. So our advice 20 years ago was get a line of credit. It's much lower interest, pay off your credit cards and cancel them. Nobody ever canceled the cards. So again, they just doubled down on all their debt.
And we've been running Hoy's Michaelis for 26 years, so Ted's not exaggerating when he says, 20 years. Like, here's the advice we gave.
Before we were gray.
That's right. I obviously color it and use all the other products, whatever you're supposed to inject into yourself to make you look pretty. So you're right. The trap was the new interest rate is lower than the old one, so I'll pay it off with my line of credit. I'll use the balance transfer, but you end up just getting into a trap.
Right.
And that's obviously why Canadians' credit card balances were up 7% last year.
I mean, we constantly tell people you don't need to have 6, 7, 8 credit cards. Maybe you need 2, one for personal, one for business or tax expenses. The more access you have to credit, the greater the risk you're going to incur more debt than you can deal with.
Yeah, so I hate the word mindful because I don't know what it means, but I think you should be mindful, meaning I've got a plan. I've got this one credit card that I use for my business expenses because I, file an expense report or I run my own business or whatever. I've got another one that's for personal. I've decided which one has the better rewards or for whatever works for me. That's it. I'm not trying to game the system with 42 different kinds of kinds of credit cards.
Well, and we use the cashback cards because you don't have to think about it.
Yeah, I don't travel, so I don't need the points or whatever. And maybe
if you get cash, you could use that to travel. So.
Exactly. So that's I'm not very sophisticated in that sense. Now, we mentioned already this whole concept of vacations because that's a big selling point. You're going to get these points, and I think. With cash back, I understand. I'm getting cash back. I'm getting $1.
Which you then go out and spend because you think it's free money, but it's a different conversation.
But with airline points or vacation points or whatever it is, I now have to take a vacation to utilize those points.
So you have to spend additional money to take advantage of the rewards that you think you got for free.
Right. And I get it. Life is short and everyone else gets to go on a vacation and everything. But I think you got to be very, again, mindful of, is that really the best use of your money?
Right.
And if it is, fantastic.
Yeah. We're not going to tell you not to take a vacation.
I went on a vacation. You go on vacation. Like, it's fine. It's just make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. Now, the other one where we start charging things we can't afford is the whole buy now, pay later thing.
Right.
And the classic example of this is I go into the shoe store and I can buy a pair of shoes and I can pay $200 for it, or I can do the buy now, pay later where I pay it in 3 installments.
Right.
A third of it now, and then a third of it in 2 weeks, a third of it in 4 weeks or 6 weeks or however it works.
Yeah.
And there's no interest, no cost, no nothing.
Right.
What's the problem?
Well, again, you're spending money today that you've got to lay out later. And so do you plan for it? That's really the question.
Yeah. And of course, the trap is I'm going to get 2 pairs of shoes.
Right.
Because I got $200 in my wallet. I can buy 1 pair of shoes for $200. I don't know how much shoes cost. Let's assume in this scenario they cost $200. Or I can buy 2 pairs of shoes. I put the $200 down, and now I'm paying for them over time. So not a good thing. Okay, now I'm gonna read the commercial.
Okay.
And we don't have any sponsors yet, so it's not a real commercial. But
it's amazing. We seem to alienate everybody.
I know. This is episode number 548 over 10 and a half years, and nobody wants to sponsor us. So my challenge for you, the listener, today is if you are listening to this and go, okay, you guys are off base, you're missing that. Well, put a note put a thing in the comments. Then
tell us how we're off base.
Tell us how we're off base. If you agree with us, great. Tell us that too. And if anything we said actually made sense, well, send this to one of your friends or something. Maybe it's a subtle way to tell them that they need to be paying a little more attention to their credit cards. You can share this on any of the different socials. You're on all the socials, right?
Sure.
Sure.
What is that?
That would be like Twitter and...
is it still called that?
No. And then there's a new one that's something about the sky, and then there's another one and another one. And
Gotcha.
We're definitely on Instagram and,
I think you told me we're on 60 different platforms.
Well, that's the podcast. People in any given month listen to us on 60 different platforms. But socials, I think we're only on like 5.
Is it translated into other languages?
I believe so.
Wow.
I believe in real time. In real time. So, and you and I are, of course, huge on TikTok.
We're huge on TikTok.
We don't have accounts, but Hoyes Michaelis does.
Is that the one that's being banned?
Yes, I think that's the one.
It's not going to happen.
And it was because we went on it, I think.
Probably.
So now let's just reiterate what we talked about. I think it was last week about our Joe Detter study.
Right.
The average balance that someone owes on credit cards is way up. You already 26%.
It's a huge number.
And so the total credit card debt now is for our clients. Yep. These are people who get into so much trouble that they have to file a proposal or bankruptcy, is well over $20,000.
That's right.
And their total unsecured debt is over $60,000.
And so as a comparison, folks, the average Canadian that's carrying credit card debt, the balance is about $6,000.
A much lower number.
Right.
Now, if their average unsecured debt, and unsecured means it's not a car loan or a mortgage.
Yeah, there's nothing pledged as security or as collateral for it.
So if their credit card debt is just over $20,000 and their total unsecured debt is over $60,000, what's the other $40,000?
A big chunk of it is income taxes for people. There's also personal loans and lines of credit. There's my favorite type of borrowing out there, payday loans.
Payday loans, those are on the list. And student loans would be another one. So credit card balances have gone way up, but there's still a massive amount of other debt as well.
Exactly. And all of the debt across the spectrum was way up this year.
Yes.
Right? Wasn't it 12% overall?
It doesn't matter what it is. And it's because of what you had already said earlier. Well, okay, my credit card interest is high, so if I can qualify for a line of credit, I'll use that.
Right.
But then if I don't get rid of the other thing, then I end up with even more debts. And what that leads to, of course, is higher delinquency rates,
right?
Which are still at historically relatively low levels as we record this in 2025, but they are on the uptick. And I think we're going to see more of that going forward. The big reason, in my view, that this has happened is the cost of living. Like, why are we carrying more debt? It's not because, we're all taking way more vacations.
Right.
It's because I go to the grocery store, and even though inflation has eased off in the last few months, prices haven't come down.
Well, they don't come down.
No.
They just don't go up as fast.
Exactly. And people don't get that.
And there's no way that anyone's wages or earnings went up as fast as the cost of living last year.
Right. And so the costs go up. They're still that high. They're not going up as fast, but your wages haven't caught up. How do you bridge the gap?
credit cards.
Credit cards. That's the main thing. And that's so credit cards are becoming a survival tool,
Right.
which is sad, but I totally get it. You know, my tire got flat. I need a new tire. My car broke down. I don't have
It's
the
not
cash.
much use to me without a tire.
Right. So I gotta do it. I gotta use what I can use. So my next question for you: do you think if we could go back to a world where people used cash,
Right.
people would make better financial decisions? Or let me ask the question slightly differently. If we use debit for everything, do you think we would make better financial decisions?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the immediate consequence of that would be probably a recession because people wouldn't be able to spend the kind of money that they've been spending historically for the last couple of decades.
Right, I get that. But we're not here to advise
individuals,
whoever
right?
the prime minister is today.
Yep.
Yes, I care about the economy, but only a little bit. Our job is to advise individual people.
Yeah, but the ripple effect is, of course, if all the individual people do this, a good chunk of them will lose their jobs.
Yes.
So it kind of makes the problem worse.
But we're not at the point.
But that's not the problem.
Yeah, we're not at the point yet where every Canadian watches this podcast.
Really?
I don't understand why.
It's because we don't have sponsors.
Because we don't have sponsors.
We can't push it out.
Exactly
hard.
right. So, but if you were talking to, let's say it's your best
talking to my
friend,
children.
your children. There you go.
Yep.
So, what is your advice to them? And I realize the 12-year-old probably doesn't have 12 credit cards yet, but what would you be advising them then?
Right. Well, you can't use a credit card as a replacement for cash. If you don't have the money in the bank, you shouldn't be making the purchase.
Right. So I guess stated another way, it is a replacement for cash. I've got the cash in the bank. I will use it.
Right.
It's definitely should not be a way to borrow.
It's a convenience tool. It's not a form of borrowing.
On your credit report, it shows you the utilization rate,
Right.
which is the percentage of the total that you're using. So I've got a $10,000 limit on my credit card. I typically carry a balance of $3,000.
It's 30%.
30% utilization rate. And so our general advice is, well, you want to keep that number as low as possible.
Mm-hmm.
The best number, of course, is
Zero.
Do not have any utilization.
Then you're not charged any interest. You got no issues.
And is that realistic?
Well, obviously, for the folks that come to see us, it's not. For the average Canadian, in most cases, it is. And again, the average Canadian's credit card debt's $6,000 or $7,000, which is still a lot of money.
Yeah.
But it's manageable. The interest won't kill you.
Okay, let's talk practical advice here before your voice is completely shot. And,
Right.
we have to end the show. So, do you agree that at the very least you should have your credit card set up on auto pay so that on the due date it automatically gets paid, or do you believe in some other kind of system?
No, I'm similar to you. I get paid on the 15th and the end of the month. I make sure my credit cards are paid on the 15th and the end of the month. The money comes in, I make sure things get dealt with.
That's when I get paid too.
Right. Amazing.
I think that's because we both work for the same company.
Don't I sign your check?
I believe so. No, it's all electronic now. There's no cash anymore. So you talked about the credit card offers. I get this offer in the mail. I don't know if they still come in the mail. It's probably electronic now. I don't know how it works.
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't remember seeing any for quite a while.
No, there haven't been as many. We used to be getting a flood of them. Maybe that's because our credit isn't good. I don't know. But when you get one of these offers, and the classic time you get it is you actually physically go to the bank.
Right.
Because you come back from your vacation and you've got $47 and you want to convert it into that good hard Canadian cash. And so you have to go into a branch to do that. And they say, oh, Mr. Michaelis, good to see you. Would you like a credit card? Would you like this offer? Would you like this offer?
Right.
So how do you know when the correct response is, no, thank you, I'm good? Like, is there some...
Yeah. So if you already have 2 credit cards, the answer is always going to be no. That's a safe...
Okay,
unless you're going to cancel one of the first ones to replace it with this new one.
So let's talk about that. And so I'm going to cancel one to replace it with a new one.
And you're going to take a hit on your credit report
That's
when
the
you
problem.
do that.
That's the problem. And why is that?
Well, suddenly you've got a lower total amount of credit available, so your utilization, if there is any debt, is going to be higher.
and you've blown away your history.
Right.
So your credit score, as we've talked about many times, is a combination of many things. Do you pay your bills on time? But history is one of the components.
Right.
So if you've had that credit card for 10 years, that's going to give you a higher credit score than the same credit card if you had it for 6 months.
Correct.
So if you're constantly taking the new offer,
if you're flipping all over the place, then you don't appear to be very consistent.
right,
You're not a good risk.
You don't have the same stability. Now,
Right.
I guess if I'm offered a credit card that has a 10% interest rate and I've currently got one at 20%, then it kind of does make sense to use the new one.
Right.
But I would dig a little deeper and say, why does the interest rate on your credit card matter?
Mm-hmm.
If you're paying it in full every month, it shouldn't matter.
Correct.
And that's obviously what our advice is. So you are a big believer then if someone has 4 credit cards, they should cut up 2 of them and cancel them.
Correct. And if you're afraid to do that originally, just take them out of your wallet and put them in an ice cube tray or something so you can't get at them easily.
Right. And yes, we understand that potentially causes a hit on your credit score.
Now, stopping using them won't cause you much of a hit.
Right.
It's if you actually cancel them that there's an issue.
Yeah. And I guess the advantage of canceling them is I can't use them.
Yeah.
No one can steal them. I can't get defrauded, anything like that. But it does lower my overall utilization.
Right.
So, look, if you've got 2 credit cards with a $10,000 limit or 3 cards with a total of $30,000 limit, is there a huge difference between having 2 cards and having 3 cards? At some point, you're never going to get to a credit score of 1,000. That's not a thing. So I think it's not a thing. It only goes up to 900.
Right.
So I think at some point it's diminishing returns here.
Mm-hmm.
I think stick with 2. Don't be playing the credit score game. It's just not it's not a good idea.
And we've said this before too. The record is I had a fella come in with 29 credit cards. That was it's insane.
That's a big number. Okay, so let's end the show then by talking about somebody who is in a position like that. They've got a massive number of credit cards.
Right.
Our typical client, $60,000 in unsecured debt, over $20,000 in credit cards. The reason they are our client is there's no way they can pay that back.
Right. I mean, based on the average incomes of our client and the amount of money they have left available to pay towards their debts, the minimum payments on $60,000 is about $2,400 a month, and the budgets for our clients they've got $300 available to make those payments.
That math doesn't work.
Never works.
It's not even close.
Right.
So if you are in a position where you are only paying the minimums on your credit cards,
or you're not even doing that,
then the obvious option is, well, I guess you've got to increase your income or lower your expenses. But the shortfall you're talking about here is like a couple of $1,000s a month.
Yeah, it's more than 60% of most people's income. It can't be done.
Yeah, so can I find a part-time job making $2,000 a month?
Well, and how long could you do that anyway?
Right.
It's not sustainable.
Because if at my full-time job I'm making $3,000 a month, I've got to really get a second full-time job. Right. Is it possible to be working 100 hours a week? Probably not. Can I cut my expenses? Well, I still got to live somewhere.
Right.
Sure, I can move back with my family. They'll be happy to see me, I guess. And that's what a lot of people are forced to do. But is that what I want to do? So the obvious option, if none of those other things work, is a consumer proposal. Give us the 30-second on that.
So consumer proposal is a program where you repay a portion of what you owe. Now, you're probably saying, why would anybody accept only part of what I owe them? Well, it's designed to be an alternative to bankruptcy. Bankruptcy, you make payments based on your income, and the amount of money that your creditors receive is significantly lower than a proposal where you voluntarily say, I'm going to give you back some of the money.
So if a bankruptcy, let's say I've got surplus income, I got to make some payments, I'm going to lose my tax refund, I'm going to lose my Canada carbon rebate and whatever else. And let's say all of that totals $7,000.
Right.
So they come in to see you and you go, well, based on the level of your debt and everything, we're going to do a consumer proposal where you pay $200 a month for 5 years. That's $12,000. Mm-hmm. Why would I do that? Why would I pay $12,000 instead of $7,000 in a bankruptcy?
Well, first, the $200 a month may be much more manageable than losing that $7,000 in the short term that a bankruptcy takes. You may need your tax refund every year because you use it to maintain the car or do extraordinary expenses that you know you have all the time. You may be uncomfortable with the whole idea of bankruptcy. We hear that a lot. The proposal, you're paying back part of what you owe, so you feel better about doing that. When we talk to you, if we actually think the bankruptcy is a more sensible option, we'll tell you that. These days, the ratio is about 7 to 1, 7 proposals for every bankruptcy.
Although it's possible as we move through 2025
That's going to
the
change.
ratio of bankruptcies will increase. So, yeah, the answer is every situation is different.
Right.
I don't know what's right for you until I talk to you. We will explain those different options to you. And you're right. In a lot of cases, yeah, I'd rather pay $100 every 2 weeks because I can afford that rather than taking the big hit in a bankruptcy. It's also slightly better on my credit. And yes, I feel better because I've actually made a deal with the creditors. They have to agree to it.
That's right.
In a bankruptcy, I just do it. And a bankruptcy is much more open-ended too. If your income goes up, you're paying more. If you get an inheritance, you lose it. You never know until the end what's going to happen. So, but I agree with you. You have to talk to a licensed insolvency trustee. And if you're in Ontario, we kind of think it should be us. But you can talk to whoever you want. But make sure it's a licensed insolvency trustee who explains all your options.
There you go.
So there you go. That's credit cards. Our firm, Hoyes Michaelis and Associates, is on all of the social media platforms. Ted isn't. I'm not, but if you'd like to share your thoughts, use the hashtag DebtFreeIn30. Do you know what a hashtag is?
I'm going to crawl away and die now.
Ted is going to go. If you're watching on YouTube, please join the many thousands of others who have subscribed to the channel, and please like and share. And please leave your questions or comments. We want to hear from you. Most of you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever. So thank you. And again, please like and subscribe. That's our show for today. Ted's chair is empty. He is gone to deal with his cold, but he will be back with me next week for a new episode of Debt Free in 30. Until next week, thanks for listening. I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.